Our President, it is possible that Roe v. Wade will be overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, when that happens, the problem of abortion will be returned to the states. Will you indeed pursue a federal law banning abortion or a federal constitutional amendment banning abortion once and for all? Dr. Paul.
On the same subject, same
Yes.
question. On that, I have supported the amendment that defines life at conception. I think that's important, but I don't endorse the idea that the enforcement should come from the federal government. We don't need another police force in Washington. We already have 100,000 bureaucrats running around with guns, so we don't need more enforcement. All acts of violence under our Constitution, like murder and injury and robbery, that's not a federal offense. It's a state offense, and laws do vary. So I would not want to repeal that provision. It was meant that it would be handled at the states. And we have to remember, when we tend to nationalize things, we expose ourselves to great danger, because when they make a mistake, it's national. This is the reason that we had Roe versus Wade. They should have never heard that case. They nationalized it. So I'm very cautious about nationalizing these laws. So it would be much better to state when life begins, make the law enforcement at the state level, which has been traditional. But it should not be that we enforce this law at the national level, but there's no reason why we can't define when life begins.
But if they nationalize the problem, why is it wrong to nationalize the solution?
Well, and I would be glad to do that. And the solution, it would have been solved 10 years ago, because I've been pushing a law that could have been passed by majority vote when we had the House and the Senate and the presidency. If we would have been determined, we could have repealed Roe versus Wade by passing the law called the We the People Act. It removes the jurisdictions from the federal court. So you remove this jurisdiction, which is a constitutional authority. That could have been done 10 years ago. We could have continued to work on the amendment. We could have continued to change the courts. But if we would have passed that by majority vote, we would have saved millions of lives, and we have not had the support from the Right to Life community to at least do that, and I do not understand why that is the case, because we would have accomplished that in a short period of time and would have not distracted from the national solution of amending the Constitution and changing our Supreme Court.
Thank you very much.
In the process, if you can all take your seats, please. In the process of doing the research behind all of this, I discovered some stories about you all that are very impressive, and these are stories that are not often told. And I do not wish to embarrass anyone here, but I think it would be to your benefit to offer to the people in this sanctuary a specific challenge, either in your childhood or in your adulthood, that shaped your view of life and had an impact on your faith, your spirituality, and your public life. And I'll allow anyone, this is not a required question, but if there ever was a place to bare your soul, this is Dr. Paul.
I was born and raised in Pennsylvania in a family of 5 boys during the Depression, so I remember the tail end of the Depression and World War II, and they weren't such great economic times. But our family was oriented around the church. It was oriented around our family life, a lot of hard work and a work ethic. And the work ethic taught us all at a very young age that you worked and you were rewarded for this. But the important things in the church life for me came as a Lutheran, making a decision to go through catechism, which is somewhat different than others. So that catechism and making the decision to join the church, as well as being exposed to a couple of crusades by Billy Graham, was the time when I made my commitment to Christ, and it was a very important period in my life. But you said we exempt, our wives and our children because they are so important and they are at the top of our list. But there was something that was given to me in many ways I earned because of something I wanted to do, and that was going through medical school. and finally getting through the military and all my training. But going into medical practice was really astounding, because to me it was the assumption that people will come to me in trust, and that I took very, very seriously. And although I didn't have a personal experience like Herman had for medical illness, I got to share those experiences, and I'm sure your doctors were very important. So I got to share that with new life coming into the world. There's nothing more marvelous in medicine than sharing new life and having delivered thousands of babies. And this is a very joyous profession. But then there was something else that happened that I feel very blessed with, because I had an inquisitive mind, and I wanted to know how the world worked and how the economy worked and why we had recessions and depressions. So I was fascinated not with fishing and hunting. I got fascinated with reading economics. And then I thought speaking out would be a lot of fun, but it led to a little bit of involvement in a political life. I feel very lucky that I am blessed that I've been able to practice medicine, have my family, and also participate in public life, and I'm very thankful.
Hi, I'm Brian Brown, President of the National Organization for Marriage. My first question is for Dr. Paul. We've heard from others of their support of a federal marriage amendment. Would you support an amendment to the U.S. Constitution defining marriage as the union of one man and one woman?
No, I have taken a position that I would not support. I support DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, but I would prefer, under our system of laws, that all these problems be taken care of in a constitutional manner, which I would defer to the states. But actually, I would go even a little bit further. Me personally, my personal beliefs, although it's not likely to be achieved in my lifetime, is traditionally throughout our Christian, Judeo-Christian history, it was usually dealt with by the church. And I think the reason we fight and fume over this is because we have too much government everywhere. So I would say that the church should make this decision. That's the most important place to determine marriage. When you think about in the Old Testament, when the God that led the people out of Egypt was not a king. They didn't have a king. And then when they got to the Holy Land, they had judges. They didn't have kings dictating and ruling. But the family dealt with this, and the family dealt with marriages. But they had a judge to determine this. Matter of fact, when the people came to Samuel and said, look, we need more rules and more laws. We want more government to tell us what to do, and we need more of this. Samuel was old and ready to retire, and he says, no, that's a bad mistake. You don't need more rules and more government. You don't need this. The government will overreact. And today, I think this is what has happened to us. We have deferred to the federal government. We have way too much government. We should go in the other directions. Before you know it, the next step, what if the next step is, wouldn't it be wonderful if the United Nations defined marriage? I don't want to go up that way. I want to go back down all the way to the family and the church. Believe me, it would be a happier and more peaceful world if we went in that direction, rather than asking the government and asking the king to solve all these problems. We need the family to deal with it, and we can take our message and learn something from the Old Testament, how there was such a strong emphasis on the patriarchal society and the disputes settled by judges, rather than looking for big government.
Every one of the six of you have talked about the importance of preserving life. And nothing takes life more than the declaration of war. I would like to hear from you, because nothing frightens a mother more than watching her son or daughter go off. Their pride in their country, but their fear for their child. Can you define the moral justification for war? You can use Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria. What is the moral justification? Representative Paul.
You know, the early church struggled with this. I mean, Christ came, Christ taught about peace, and Christ was to be the Prince of Peace, and we were to defend that. But early on, the church struggled with this, and St. Augustine came up with the principles of the just war. I believe in them. I think we should follow those from a religious viewpoint, but we have a constitution that is very clear to guide us to try to prevent these wars, and that is that we don't go to war without a declaration. The wars that we have fought since World War II are all illegal, unconstitutional, immoral, and all were unwinnable, and it was tragic. It was tragic because we did it by failing the rule of law, and the tragedy now of these wars of the past 10 years. 10 years, and we have been so complacent. It added $4 trillion to our national debt. 8,500 Americans have been killed in these wars. 44,000 have come home wounded and crippled. Hundreds of thousands are looking for help. And we want to blind ourselves to this. And it isn't in our national defense. It was mischief. It's getting involved where we don't need to be involved. I think it is an utter tragedy of what's happening. And if you want to talk about a family life, there has to be somebody in this audience that has been the bearer of bad news, either a loved one lost or a loved one crippled. And it's on and on. I had one soldier come to me the other day, and he was so against the wars, and he spent 3 or 4 tours over there. And he says, I lost so many buddies, and I don't know why we were there, and there's no signs of progress over there. But he says, now I'm losing my buddies to suicide. The wars destroy the family, undermine the family, as does the economic climate. The bad economics and war is the 2 most destructive things to the family, and we ought to concentrate on that, and we can't concentrate on the economics unless you look at the business cycle, why we have inflation, busts and booms. Otherwise, we will continue on a downhill path.